If you've ever heard anyone speak about Majora's Mask, then you probably don't need me to tell you that this game is f***ing weird. This game revolves around an interminable 3-day cycle in which events occur at the same time throughout each day. Once the time limit runs out, the world of Termina gets crashed into by the all-present moon of Termina. The way you avoid time running out is by using Link's instrument to play the Song of Time, which in turn resets time. This also resets all NPCs' daily cycles again, and these never change as the game is stuck in a perpetual loop. Just like in Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask also has a very iconic and fitting opening sequence. It shows off our main character Link throughout the whole of our central hub, Clocktown. The music in this section is also really nice and relaxing, which kinda gives you a false sense of security as the premise of the game is surprisingly dark. Skull Kid steals Link's ocarina and horse Epona. Link chases the Skull Kid in order to try and get said things back, but gets turned into a Deku Scrub. After navigating through a mini cave type environment, we meet our first side character, the Happy Mask Salesman. It is now explained to us that the mask the Skull Kid wears is the game's namesake, Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask needs to be retrieved before the Skull Kid can cause any more mayhem. Tatl tells us to find the Great Fairy who appears in pieces due to something Majora did. We find the piece of the Great Fairy which was missing and take it back to her. In return she grants us magic power. With this magic power, once we encounter the Skull Kid, we shoot him with the Deku Link's magic bubbles. Skull Kid drops the Ocarina of Time which we pick up and play the Song of Time, and we're back at the beginning. But this time, we have our ocarina, or in this case Deku Pipes. The Happy Mask Salesman teaches us the Song of Healing, and that song heals Link back into the human form again. The Song of Healing is used to get Link different transformation masks from all races in the game. Examples of this are Deku Link, Zora Link, and Goron Link. Once becoming human form Link, you are free to adventure outside of Clocktown. This leads us to the first area in the game that Tale tells us about. The swamp is the home of the first dungeon of Majora's Mask, Woodfall. The way we get in is by getting taught the Sonata of Awakening, which the aim is to open up the dungeon. Woodfall Temple is a solid introductory dungeon. Ocarina of Time's first dungeon was rather simple, and was used to show off basic mechanics and to ease the player into the game. Majora's Mask is quite the opposite, with Woodfall being quite challenging and puzzles being very clever. Just like in every other Zelda game, the temples give one key item which helps progress through both the game and the dungeon. This is also the case in Majora's Mask. In Woodfall we receive the bow, Snowhead the fire arrows, Great Bay the ice arrows, and Stone Tower Temple the light arrows. The boss in Woodfall is Odalwa. Odalwa is quite a freaky character in both the way he looks and moves. The chant Odalwa does is also rather terrifying. With all this said though, the remake really messes up the fight. In the original you were free to use any item in your arsenal to take him down, yet the 3D version requires you to attack him by burying in a Deku flower, flying over him and dropping down a Deku nut, and then attacking his new eyeball weak point. Eyeball weak points are one of the most common weaknesses in video game enemies, so seeing Nintendo make this change was always going to lead to disappointment. In fact, all bosses besides Majora in the 3D remake have eyeball weak points, whilst in the Nintendo 64 counterpart no eyeball weaknesses were present at all. Each dungeon in Majora's Mask has 15 stray fairies hidden throughout. The Great Fairy in Clocktown awards Link with the Great Fairy's Mask. This is used to help find the stray fairies in the dungeons and gives an indication for if one is nearby. As soon as all the stray fairy pieces are collected, we take them back to the Great Fairy closest to the temple and get tipped a certain reward depending on the fairy you save. The next area after Woodfall is Snowhead, which is a snow biome, which I very much enjoy snow biomes in video games. You guys remember the area from New Super Mario Bros. Wii? No?
Fuck you.
Snowfall is the area in which we get the Lens of Truth and spot the suffering ghost of Goron's Darmani. We follow him up to where his grave was buried, heal his soul and take his face. From here we get the song for a baby Goron, play the song for the baby Goron, and then get given the rest of the song from the baby Goron. We play this song to the big Goron, preventing us access to Snowhead Temple, and it kills him, I guess. Oh no, wait, he's fine. Snowhead Temple is a decent temple with some really good puzzles. The only problem with this temple is A lot of the puzzles revolved around a really huge central pillar, which when it's positioned correctly leads to the boss. In order to get to Great Bay, we need to recover Epona. We do this by getting a powder keg, taking it to Romani's ranch and then fighting fake flying ghosts. Upon completion, Romani grants us Epona's song, which then gets us into the Great Bay coast. Here we bring Macau, the Zoran hero, to the shore and heal his soul. I'll put this briefly as almost every human who's played Majora's Mask 3D has covered this. The swimming is shit. It's just shit. On the Nintendo 64, Zora Link in water is the quickest and most nimble we've ever seen him. And now in the 3DS version, the fun high-speed swimming is changed to slow, basic swimming. Not even the use of magic takes us up to the original Zora Link's quickest speed, and a lot of the time you'll find you no longer have the magic to use for the quicker swimming anyway. Great Bay Temple requires a song in order to enter. To get this song we have to find all 7 Zora eggs and then take them to a laboratory. During this process we find a hookshot, and if you have magic you'll find Shiro, the invisible soldier. Which I, however, used mine up on Zora swimming, so I couldn't see him. We play the song, we get taught to Lulu, then out comes a turtle who takes us to Great Bay Temple. Most water-themed areas in video games I hate, but Great Bay Temple was an exception. The temple here is pretty straightforward and constantly flows nicely. I never necessarily felt confused during the temple. Because of this, the structure of the temple is made to appear more linear than the other dungeons in the game. The mini-boss in this temple is also enjoyable. The 2 issues I faced, however, when revisiting the 3DS version is again the boss fight. The ice arrow mechanic is also quite pathetic now as well. In the original you were free to use them outside and inside of the temple, but now you can only use them in these sparkly patches during the temple and in the outside of Ocarina Valley. In order to get to Stone Tower Temple we need both the Elegy of Emptiness and the Mirror Shield. The Mirror Shield is a part of a major backtracking quest, which Gibdos give hints about what they want, then you have to deliver what they want to them. But the Elegy of Emptiness we get from a really neat mini boss battle. I personally think that Stone Tower Temple was a pretty neat dungeon. It's one of my favourite in the whole game. The music is remarkable here, the colours and world detail are great, and the puzzles are quite challenging, taking a while to figure out. The mini-boss here was probably my favourite out of all the mini-bosses in Majora's Mask. The exit of this boss is badass. The real downside of this dungeon, however, is the twin mold boss, who is a real pain in the ass and seems to take forever to kill. It seems more unfair than difficult, as twin mold's damage seems to reset every time he burrows into the ground. But alas, once we beat Stone Tower Temple, we travel back to Clocktown, since we have rescued all the giants we faced Majora inside the moon and beat his ass in a real sweet fight. Majora has 3 different forms, the third being the hardest, the other 2 were relatively easy. The only challenge I seemed to face was Z targeting the wrong enemy. Every time I wanted to lock onto Majora, I ended up locking onto one of the masks. However, overall, pretty solid and challenging fight, and a real nice way to end the game. There is a huge list of problems that the remake has created. We've already covered the eyeball weak points in enemies, the ice arrows, and Zora Link's new slow swimming. But more examples of this are Deku Link's water jumping and the chase with Captain Kita. Deku Link has been slowed down significantly in comparison to the original. The new water skipping is frustrating and very slow, and the platform outside of the Deku Butler's race is now barely escapable due to Link being so slow. Captain Kita is now incredibly slow and can be caught pretty much instantly. The new Bomber's Notebook is also annoying as the game is now frozen and needs to show us a slow interface with some information about any character we interact with. Project Restoration fixes all main issues with the Majora's Mask remake. That includes all the ones I previously mentioned like Deku skipping and Zora swimming. But this is something that has already been covered well enough by Fondled 3D, so I feel no further reason to explain it. The controls are the same as Ocarina of Time, so anyone who's played that game won't have a problem picking this up and starting without any practice. Having looked it up, a surprisingly high amount of people dislike the gyro aim function. I, however, oppose this opinion. Both Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D implemented gyro control flawlessly. The reason I prefer it is it feels more realistic. Controlling the camera and movement with where my eyes and arms follow whilst in first person brings such good immersion to the table. But even for those who dislike it, there is in fact an option to disable it. Graphically, Majora's Mask 3D shares the exact same visuals as Ocarina of Time 3D, which I don't think is a bad thing. In fact, the 3DS remakes have my favourite graphic design in the franchise. The graphics and frame rate are really the only reason the 3DS port could be recommended, as compared to the original there are so many negatives in comparison. Majora's Mask's soundtrack has always been brilliant. Just like in Ocarina of Time, Koji Kondo is also the composer of this game's music. It fits the peculiar storyline and the environments that we are faced with in Majora's Mask, and the music isn't really that much different in comparison to the Nintendo 64. Majora's Mask was a game ahead of its time back in 2000, with rather interesting game design and a strongly built world. The 3DS version capitalizes off of this, making this environment even more impressive looking. Whilst the game has plenty of negative changes, there are also a few smart changes included, which make this remaster worth playing still. Yet I don't believe it's any more worth playing than the original. That is even with the Project Restoration mod. This is as the original has a far more fitting dark mood, as well as Neryl's texture pack blows the textures from the 3DS version out of the park. Not only are better looking textures something to think about, there is also a randomizer for the Nintendo 64 version, which currently for the Nintendo 3DS version there is not. Overall, I rate Majora's Mask 3D a 7.5 out of 10, and I would consider this to actually be quite generous considering the many issues it has. Majora's Mask with the Project Restoration mod, however, I would say is about a 9 out of 10, as it fixes the main issues that I spoke about, and more.